Welcome to episode 30 of the Liz McMullen Show. I am welcoming back the awesome Isabella. Welcome back, Isabella.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, how can I resist American Yakuza II?
Oh, I'm glad you're liking it.
Yeah, it was awesome. And what we were saying off camera, and I like to start with the salacious, is that the oral sex was different in this book as opposed to the last book.
How would you say it was different?
There was a lot of tongue spearing going along.
There was definitely more tongue. There was a lot of It was the description of the oral sex. And even, there are other stuff that I noticed too, like sensual-wise, which just makes me curious to see if it happens in real life, is after an orgasm, I know that, my eyes dilate, but I've never gotten goosebumps as a result of an orgasm. So I'm like, that betrayed that she had her orgasm. I don't know if I ever noticed that. I'm not telling any family secrets right now.
I'm not looking for your family secrets, but the reason why I mention it is I never paid close attention to someone's eyes in the sense of paying attention to whether they were dilated or not. But I read it in so many books, like Radcliffe and a bunch of other folks describing that as a sign of arousal. And I was like, And then I realized, and one of my lovers told me, and they're like, yeah, your eyes get really dilated, when you're aroused. I was like, oh, okay, well, that's true. And I would have never noticed it,
And goosebumps, so I guess that goes right along with the goosebumps. Maybe you never noticed that you get those. So people get those when they orgasm.
Yeah, I've never noticed that either.
Things to look for.
Yeah, things to pay attention for the next time around,
Well, I think that, that's the trying to keep a romance fresh and trying to keep your writing fresh. You can't keep writing the same old sex scenes over and over and over in every book because it just gets repetitive and people go, oh, I've read this before, they need to get something new. And I think that I tried to be, and you said sensual, I think that in some ways I tried to be sensual and strong and yet being weak as well. I'm not sure if that makes sense.
Yes. Sometimes the bigger strength is being vulnerable for somebody who's used to being strong.
Right.
And actually, when I was reading the sex scenes in this book, I was thinking of exactly what you just mentioned, which is, it's not easy to write good sex scenes in the sense that, you have to keep on being innovative. They're not doing bizarre actions, although that's cool. But the way that you describe something has to vary. Otherwise, you're correct. It's going to sound the same as something else. There's this one author who for the most part, when she's describing someone kissing, they're molding their mouths together. And I was like, molding is just the wrong... I know it has a homonym, so I'm like... I don't find that attractive. It's just little quirky things that I was like, oh man, not again. And so when I say that oral sex was different, a lot of the approaches to particular things were different, and even different kinds of kissing and intimacy and, intensity and whatnot. So yeah, you got it. You can't just write great sex. You have to write new sex.
Yeah, I think that as romance authors, we really have to, I think sometimes that's a struggle, that when you approach a book and you're going to have love scenes in a book, there's in this book, there's sex and there's love scenes. And there are two different characters sometimes doing two different things, or one character doing two different types of sex in this book that we see. And so it's trying to keep it fresh, and when you have, this is the first, I think this is the first book I've written where there has been more than 2 points of view. So that was the other struggle, was to make sure that that third point of view was not only different, but that the reader could see that that third character, Colby, was different, and her reaction to everything was different, and her sex was different, and how she approached it was vastly different than,
That's important, because when I was reading several books by one author, and I loved the books in terms of the romance, right? And the plot and everything, but sex was so repetitive. It's like, she kisses her, she runs her finger through her hair, she touched her right breast, there's some, vaginal penetration with some fingers, and then shebang, and I was just like, Lord have mercy. There's this movie, Playing by Heart, that had Angelina Jolie in it. And she was describing sex with one of her ex-boyfriends and how it was wonderful, but then after a certain point she realized that it was always the same thing, and then she found a how-to video in his stuff, and basically it was the exact same thing that he did every time.
No. Yeah, see, I think that the readers hopefully expect fresh, romance. I mean, it's difficult to make sure that it's not the same penetration as you had in the book prior to that, or the same fellatio, or those kinds of things that you've had in other books. While, I mean, there's only so many ways lesbians can have sex. Well, there's lots of ways lesbians can have sex.
Well, but it's the ways of describing the sex as well.
Yeah.
Like, there's one thing that I thought was kind of neat. Of course, I take notes on. It's like, the rough contours of pebbled areolas. And I was like, I like that description.
Well, I think that, we have to recognize that not all women have smooth nipples, or not all women have, big voluptuous breasts, or, those things that make us different sometimes can be used to our advantage to describe those things and to make our scenes different and hopefully refreshing, because we don't all look the same underneath our clothing. No,
we don't. I had a funny conversation at the bar, Henrietta Hudson, which I used to go to a lot. And one of my friends, she's black, but she only dates white girls. She's got a thing for white girls. And they were talking about nipple color and that they were pink and whatnot. And I said, my nipples aren't pink. I said, my nipples aren't pink. And my DJ friend turned to me. She's like, they're not? I said, no. They're not pink,
Well, I don't think you can... I'm not sure lesbians kind of sit around and talk about their anatomy like that.
Unless they're me and my friends, I guess.
They've had a few drinks sitting around a table saying, by the way.
No, it doesn't come up all the time, but I remember how it stuck in my brain. So anyway, we have this new little trollop, Kobe, who is a treasury agent, and she's got a hard-on for Luce in the sense that she wants to put her in jail. But what's interesting with her is that this is the only thing that I was kind of incredulous about. I understand being closeted and the reasoning behind it, but then I didn't understand how she would have sex in a bathroom. I thought that would be really risky to do that at work.
I think that because I was asked this by my editor, who kind of said the same thing. And I said, but if you think about her personality and how edgy she is and how she's closeted and yet she does all these risky behaviors, I think it fits within her personality. It's kind of that, I'm gay, but screw you kind of, attitude. Maybe it's something to think about.
No, yeah, because I was just like, that doesn't gel for me, but at the same time, I'm on board with you in the fact that this is the way that she expresses herself. And one of the things that cracked my ass up, because this came up during the presidential debates, and I can't remember if it was a debate I think it was a debate. And so the binders of women was a comment that came up, during the debates. And then, in your book, Cody was referring to her little black book, I'm sure, as her little binder of women. And I was like, that's really funny.
Well, I think that sometimes you can take stuff out of real life and use it to your advantage in your books. So sometimes I don't think readers see the double meaning or how sometimes authors use those things out of real life in their writing. Sometimes we hide little messages.
Yeah, I love those little ding.
Well, and I think that, Colby having sex, I had a conversation last week with someone who was in the service, and they were talking about all the places you could have sex on a ship, that all the dark and places that you could have sex on a ship, and no, you're not supposed to, and no, you're not supposed to do those things, but it happens all the time. Mm-hmm. And so, the fact that Colby's not out at work, but yet she has this risky behavior, kind of really speaks to who she is. She's really great at her job, but yet this other side of her life kind of is so counter to what she does every day at work.
And also she has a little depth because she's not as callous as she seems, in terms, because it's not just that she's a player. She does have feelings for Brooke, whether or not she was mature enough to actually have a relationship with someone or like Brooke. Doesn't change the fact that she had feelings for her. And I thought that gave her a little more depth because, otherwise it seems as if there's nobody who can truly touch her.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that plays out in a couple of places in the book. I hope it does. When she kind of refers to Brooke as Brookie, she says, Brookie, what are you thinking? In a couple of places, and she doesn't. And I think she's surprised by where Brooke is as a person in this book. Mm-hmm. Also, we see that surprise on Colby, and it was like, that's not who I used to know you as. And, so we have that exchange that happens in the office as well, between those two characters.
Another thing that popped up, which I think is also very real, is Luce has this larger-than-life character, and Brooke, in their romantic, it's been alluded to what's been happening, because they, this is, I guess, a year after they got together. Mm-hmm. And so she's willing to cede power to Brooke in the bedroom, to Luce in the bedroom. But it had played out in other parts of her relationship, and she realized that she'd kind of, in a certain respect, lost herself and didn't have that perspective until there was a rift between her and Luce. And I kind of like that coming to the surface, because in real life you can have that epiphany, that aha. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the book, you could sense that she and Luce are going to have a very different relationship.
Yeah, I think that where they were in American Yakuza 1 and where they are in American Yakuza 2, really we have these life-defining moments that kind of happen, and through no fault of her own, she does, give up some of her power or what we would perceive as control and power and her independence. Mm-hmm. I think somewhere in the book I say that, Brooke realizes that she'd lost her independence by being so involved, with this bigger than life person. Mm-hmm. And then her whole world kind of falls apart in a matter of just hours, without realizing why. One minute she's being supportive and helping, and the next minute she's literally losing everything. Mm-hmm. And she doesn't know why. And then all of a sudden it dawns on her that she's, lived this life for a year, and quite comfortably. A lot of people do. We hear all the time of people who, go to their spouse comes to them and says, okay, I'm done, and the other spouse is shocked, saying, what do you mean you're done? I thought everything was fine. Mm-hmm. And don't have any idea. And Brooke's not faced with that kind of a situation, but it kind of escalates to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I found myself in a position where, because I was being very sensitive to the emotional needs of my partner, I realized that I had become very cautious, and thoughtful, but that effort was being taken for granted, and was, this person was surprised when I was not going out of my way to be careful. And when I decided I did want to, I knew what I had to say was going to rock the boat. But I had needs, and I had things that I wanted, and it was incompatible with me being submissive in a certain way. Mm-hmm. And that didn't gel with me. At first, the reason behind it and how things changed over a year, and the reasons why they did change made sense, and I didn't regret them. But at the same time, I'm like, you know what? I need somebody to be careful of how I feel about something and be sensitive to how I would react to something. Mm-hmm. And I didn't even see it as losing myself as much as I was like, I need some reciprocity here.
Yeah, and I think in the book, Brooke and Luce's relationship doesn't have that dynamic as much as I think that there's kind of a knee-jerk reaction to, the theme of this book is betrayal. Mm-hmm. And if I was ever going to, if you have to put the theme into one word, it would be that, because Luce feels betrayed by everybody, including Brooke, and yet there's no reason why she should feel that about Brooke. Mm-hmm. And her knee-jerk reaction is to do something catastrophic, and without giving it away, Brooke's kind of sidelined by this and doesn't understand it. And she's caught flat-footed in a sense that she doesn't know why, and then this realization does happen that she's kind of invested everything she has, and as quick as that happens, she finds out she could lose everything that quick. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's thematic for the dynamic of the powerful woman who was a womanizer before they met this, the character that they end up having a relationship with. And the underworld aspect that trying to think of the name of the book. Veronica Black wrote this book, and the character was a club owner and also had a lot of other dealings going on, and she decided that being in a relationship with the woman that she fell in love with was putting that woman at risk. Mm-hmm. So she decided to cut it off summarily in a very callous way, and then, was in the VIP section of her club, and she, this girl's crawling all around her lap, and the woman that she loves sees this and is appalled, and she just goes, the club owner just goes with it and exacerbates it because she thinks that by doing that she's keeping her safe. Mm-hmm. But she's not keeping her safe. Mm-hmm. And I felt the same way with Luce. She decided that, she was going to be very rough on Brooke. And I don't know who it was serving, because it wasn't serving either one of them.
Yeah, I think that, oftentimes I think that the idea of the book is we think we're doing the best thing for somebody else when we're actually not. Mm-hmm. And I think that in Luce's defense, she's dealt with this death, and then she has this betrayal, and Frank is still out there now. He's we've got this whole play with what's happening with Frank and that part of it, and she thinks she's trying to protect Brooke, and that's not what's happening. And then there's the betrayal that seems to be coming at her from all aspects.
Exactly.
Because we have this whole idea of what happens after the death without I guess we're just going to have to say it, the death of her grandfather, and then there's another piece of betrayal that happens that she doesn't, there's no, and the other problem is there's no resolution for this betrayal.
Yes, that was something that I was surprised with, because like I expected it to go in a different way, and that Luce would find, just confront this woman. I thought we don't have that. No, and I thought it was going to happen, and it didn't. I was just like, wait, I thought for sure she was going to get all up in this person's grill, and what does she look like? What kind of person is she? How's she's going to react? I had it in my head.
Well, and this is, I would guess, suspense and intrigue with, some romance in there and stuff. And we don't have that closure because is it important to the story? Because it would give us another thread that we'd have to follow off in another area. And so, this woman becomes kind of this, I'm trying to think of a good word. She symbolizes the betrayal of her grandfather, who she never suspected would betray her ever.
And if he would betray her, then anyone and everyone could betray her.
And that's exactly how she looks at Brooke now.
Yeah.
Because if my grandfather can do this to me, what skeletons do you have in your closet? Is one of those lines that Luce says to Brooke. What skeletons do you have in your closet that I need to know about, or do you have any? And which Brooke doesn't have any clue about what's happening because everything's imploding. We find out something about Luce that we're kind of surprised about. And, I think my intent was to not only just, Luce was strong and powerful, and she was this kind of, really, I don't want to say omnipotent, but she was this kind of, bigger than life person in American Yakuza II or American Yakuza I that steps into Brooke's life and they work it out. But she's vast. I think she's very different in American Yakuza II.
So actually, this parlays very well into the reading that you were going to do for us.
Sure.
Because it talks about Luce when she's not this hot, prowling, sexy predator, like she's hurting.
Yeah, I think in American Yakuza II, she's done a 180. She's still strong. She's still opinionated. We still have that, kind of strong person, but we have her in a really different way because now we see a more wounded Luce. Mm-hmm. And, sometimes the way people, when they're wounded, deal with things isn't the best. And we find out she's not dealing with it in the best possible way. Mm-hmm. So you want me to go ahead and get started?
Yes, please.
Okay. This is chapter 6. The smell of whiskey, incense, and sweat saturated the dark room. Tossing the 2 fingers of whiskey back, Luce pulled the bottle off the coffee table, almost dropping it on its way to refilling the crystal tumbler. A generous pour lightened the load slightly as she fumbled to reset it on the glass table. She grabbed a piece of paper off the table, attempting to focus on the writing and reread what only minutes ago felt like entering a nightmare. Betrayed again, this time by her own grandfather. How could it be? How could it be? Searching her mind, she tried to remember exactly what the lawyer had said. He'd been waiting for her in her study when she got home tonight, telling her it was critical he speak with her immediately. What could be so important that it couldn't wait until tomorrow when she was a day further from the death of her grandfather, she wondered. Tom asked me to personally deliver the news of part of his bequest. Tom? Oh, that's how I knew your grandfather is Tom Yoshida. I don't understand, Luce said, a headache starting at the back of her head and traveling forward. Twisting her head, she hoped she could relieve it with a few strategic rotations, but it wasn't to be. Well, the lawyer's discomfort was obvious, but Luce wasn't in a compassionate mood. Yes. Luce closed her eyes and rubbed her temples, wishing the sweaty little man would disappear quickly. Miss Potter, how much did you know about your grandfather? You need to quit talking in riddles and get to the point before I set you out on your ass. Sammy? Silently, Sammy appeared behind the man and bowed. Yes, oh, Yaibun? This man was leaving. Please see that he's escorted off the property, Luce said, turning to leave. Miss Potter, please, this could affect your inheritance. A moment is all I need. Please, he implored. Luce nodded and Sammy exited as unobtrusively as he had arrived. You have 3 minutes, Luce said, checking her watch. Miss Potter, your grandfather left a sizable amount to someone. He's clear about how this is to transpire and when. Continue. Luce waved her hand impatiently. Tom is leaving an apartment he had in the city and a monthly allowance that's to be dispersed on the 1st of the month to a Mrs. Amanda Linwood. What? If you contest the will, it will automatically send it into conservatorship and you'll be sent a monthly allowance as well. I don't understand. We transferred most of the business into my name years ago. How? What's going on? I don't understand. Luce searched the man's face, trying to grasp what he was saying. A woman? What woman? Okay, you have me at quite a disadvantage. What woman are we talking about? I had urged Tom to tell you about Amanda. He said he would, but I guess things happened so quickly Wait, stop. What the fuck are you talking about? Your grandfather had a wife. Well, sort of a wife. What? Luce felt herself sway, and then the lawyer was by her side, helping her sit on the sofa. You mean my grandmother? I'm afraid not. What the fuck are you talking about? My grandfather had another wife, or sort of a wife? I'm sorry to have to be the one to tell you all of this, especially so soon after his death. I would have hoped he would have shared all of this with you, but he didn't. So you get the honor. Luce stood and grabbed the man by the throat. I'm clearly not in the mood for this bullshit, so get to the point before I lose my temper even more. Miss Potter, I have a letter he asked me to give you. I think it'll explain everything. I need your signature to finalize the requirements of the will. No, wait. I'm not signing anything until I've read everything. Her head was spinning so fast she couldn't focus long enough to comprehend what she was being told. How could her grandfather be married, or sort of married, and she not know about it? Why hadn't he told her? Who was this woman? Was she a gold digger? So many questions, or were they lies? She needed a moment. Hell, she needed hours to digest what she was being told. Pulling the letter from his trembling fingers, she tore it open and unfolded it. Sit. Her mind blanked as she recognized the handwriting. Each sentence barely registered as she bounced from word to word, finally finishing the letter. Her grandfather's life had been a cleverly veiled lie. At least that's how she was reading the letter. A woman had taken up residence in his life, and he had conveniently forgotten to tell her. Where was she while her grandfather lay dying in the hospital? Why hadn't she come to the funeral? How much money are we talking about here? Excuse me? Her allowance. How much are we talking about here? Where does the money come from? Tom had investments put away just for this instance. Tom? Luce could barely wrap her mind around the name, let alone the fact that her grandfather had a mistress. She couldn't accept that he had a wife. No, she was an interloper, an intruder on Luce's nicely packaged life or former life. So if I fight this, what happens? Well, part of the money is to go to you in 5 years. But if you fight his wishes, he cuts you out and leaves everything to her. Luce was wealthy enough for her taste, so the money wasn't an issue. Another woman was the issue. How much could we be talking about? I have all the business assets, so it can't be that much. Well, the holdings alone are worth $2 million. The monthly payments are about $100,000. She gets an allowance. How much? I'm sorry, Tom asked me to keep that confidential. But what's left is put into an account, and in 5 years you get the bulk of that account. I can't believe what I'm hearing. My grandfather, Tom, as you like to call him, had a mistress? Wife. Whatever. All you need is my signature so she gets her money? No, actually I need your signature agreeing to everything. Otherwise she gets everything and you get nothing if you fight it. Fuck. I can't even believe what I'm hearing. Miss Potter, the letter explains everything. But I can only say I wish your grandfather had told you about Amanda. She's a wonderful woman who made your grandfather very happy. Jealousy reared its ugly head as Luce stared at the man trying to plead her father's case on his behalf. She thought it made her grandfather happy, but clearly it wasn't enough. How could he have lied to her? How could he have hidden something like this from her? They were close, but obviously not that close. Lies. Their life together had been full of lies, or at least half-truths, and now she was left alone to deal with what was left behind. Hell, now she was sounding like a jealous wife herself. How long? I'm sorry? How long were they together? They knew each other for years. How long? almost 10 years. What? I don't... Luce's voice trailed off as she tried to think about the timeline and where she was during all that time. That's about the time I was starting to take control of parts of the... Yes, once you started to run things, it freed up his time more, and, well, things sort of happened. Miss Potter, your grandfather was finally happy for the last few years of his life. He was thrilled you were doing so well with the organization, and the businesses were running like a finely tuned watch. He was very, very proud of you. Is there anything else you need? No, I know that this is a surprise. You have no fucking idea. Now, where do I need to sign? Luce pulled a pen from her blazer and waved the papers over. Miss Potter, don't. Don't say another word. Just leave. If you have any questions, he pulled a card from his pocket. Don't hesitate to call me. Luce slammed the whiskey and poured another, pitched the letter to the floor. Finishing her whiskey, she poured a full glass. Why sip it when what she wanted was relief from her memories, or were they lies? She was confused, pissed, and trying to sort the facts from the lies of the last 10 years. Oh, Yabun? Luce sat silent as the knocking continued. Oh, Yabun, it's me, Sammy. No shit. She smiled at the obvious and then gulped her drink down. The welcome burn added to her already heightened pain. Her head lobbed back against the back of the tall chair. She closed her eyes, trying to stop her world from pitching, but it was no use. Her mind wandered back and forth over the past decade, searching for any signs that she might have overlooked. She felt like a wife that had been cheated on. She was rarely sympathetic when she heard about women who complained that they never suspected a cheating spouse. They only saw what they wanted to see, overlooking obvious cheating behaviors because they couldn't handle the truth. Now she was trying to search for signs she might have missed with her grandfather. Had she been so caught up in her own life that she completely missed his need for companionship? Now she was sure she was sounding like a wife and not a granddaughter. Shit. Her world no longer resembled the one she'd woken up in this morning. It had taken a sudden shift, and she was careening out of control. Oh, Yabun. I'm fine, Sammy. Go home. Luce rubbed her aching chest. Why don't you let me call Miss Erickson? No, I'm fine, she yelled. If you value your job, go home, Sammy. Oh, Yabun. Sammy, go. In fact, send everybody home. But oh, Yabun. Sammy. Yes, oh, Yabun. You and everyone else are fired. Now get the fuck out of my house. Do you hear me? Yes, oh, Yabun. Luce stopped and waited until she heard the front door shut. Standing, she swayed, almost going ass over as she tried to walk. She hurled her empty glass against the wall, barely missing a high-dollar piece of art. Next, she tossed over the coffee table, breaking the thick glass top. Fucking bastard, how could you? How could you forget my grandmother like that? Luce stumbled around in the dark room, practically falling over the couch, landing dead center of it instead. Arms flailing, she punched the thick cushions. The coarse fabric rubbed her knuckles raw as she assaulted the defenseless object. Fuck. The cut on Luce's arm throbbed and reopened as she continued her assault. Rubbing it, she could feel warm blood smear across her hand, but it wasn't enough. Luce righted herself on the couch and slowly, calmly pulled her stiletto and flicked it open. The smell of blood drove her deeper into her pain and provided a path to manage her anger. And that closes that chapter.
Yeah, that's some intense ass shit going on there.
Yeah, we see for the first time that Luce is a little damaged. And she has a nasty habit that kind of rears its head.
Yes, and the other thing that I found interesting was, even though she didn't see that she was being intuitive, she did feel like a betrayed wife.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that happens in a family dynamic, if somebody that you love greatly has passed away, which was her grandmother, you never accept that new person shows up in that person's life, even if it's after a considerable amount of time and mourning. There's still how dare you betray the memory of this deceased family member by falling in love with and paying attention to another woman.
Mm-hmm. And I think that in Luce's mind, she had seen her grandfather as, kind of paying that homage to her grandmother, that there was no one who could replace her grandmother, and he kind of betrayed the image that Luce had of him, kind of giving her grandmother that do, putting her on that pedestal and representing the fact that maybe nobody could ever be good enough and take her grandmother's place, and that's not really the truth of the matter.
And, the other thing is, often children want to forget that their parents, or in this case grandparents, have that they're human and have sexual needs and want connection and intimacy with someone. So she felt that, I thought we had this great dynamic that, we're family and we were there for each other and whatnot. And there's just no room in that picture for another woman. And, we find out that's intentional. But I could see how she's like, but I thought we were enough, I don't understand what's going on here. How did I miss it?
Mm-hmm. And there's a really, I think it's poignant. There's a really poignant scene at the beginning of the book where he's telling Luce that Brooke is perfect for her, and he explains why Brooke is a perfect partner to Luce, and not to let her pride get in the way of a great relationship and this person, and not to let pride be the third person in their relationship. Mm-hmm. And so, she's kind of dealing with all of that, saying, wait a minute, and you have somebody else, but you don't tell me about it. You're telling me that, and it just really plays with her head. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And you could almost extrapolate that the effect that Brooke has on Luce is possibly the effect that Amanda had on her grandfather. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think, when I wrote this and I thought about those dynamics of Luce and her grandfather, and that kind of, not only was he her grandfather, but he was her mentor, and he guided her and moved her through the process and put her, as the leader, and yet she feels betrayed because he didn't trust her enough to tell her about this other woman.
Exactly. And he took the choice away from her.
Right, exactly. And we see that play out with the lawyer in that scene, because the lawyer says, I would have hoped that your grandfather would have talked to you. I told him to talk to you about this. And he still made a conscious decision not to.
And Auntie points out maybe a reason why later in the book. Yeah.
Without giving it away, yes.
Yes, and I won't say what. Because it's a secret. You have to buy the book to find out.
Well, there's a lot of different dynamics that happen in this book. There are a lot of secrets being kept in this book that start to come to life, that people are, I don't want to say shocked, but, that play out in the book.
What I think is really funny, well, not funny, but funny, is Luce is feeling betrayed by people, and, she's like, she wants Brooke to tell her things or to be honest with her, but she won't talk to Brooke. So even if Brooke was able to and decided to tell her, how she knows Kobe and whatnot, she doesn't have a chance to, because Luce is not taking her phone calls.
Yeah, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy of betrayal on that side, because we all of a sudden learn that, Colby's ex is this, DOJ agent, and she knows she needs to tell Luce, or she wants to tell Luce, because now all of a sudden all of this stuff is hitting the fan, and ultimately it feels like a betrayal. Mm-hmm. Because she doesn't get that opportunity, and you're right, it's taken away from her.
Well, and I was trying to think about it when Luce is like, do you have anything in your closet you want to tell me? And Brooke's thinking, oh my God, what is Luce going to think about, Colby being my ex and her being, a Fed? And I was thinking, like, when would that conversation pop up?
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's a scene in there where that's exactly that. Where would that conversation come up?
It's like how, it's one thing if she and Kobe were married or were in a relationship for like 8 years or live with each other, whatever. If it was not necessarily a watershed moment in somebody's life, but a true significant other, then maybe it's like, why didn't you tell me about this? But it was not like. Most people in new relationships, for the most part, do not want to hear a litany of all of the other people.
Yeah.
Let me tell you about all the other people I fucked and was in a relationship with. Let's go through this.
Right. Is now a good time? Because we could do this now if you'd like. That pillow talk moment.
It's like, that was an amazing orgasm, which reminds me.
One similar with this other person, and that's how we, that's when there's that moment between Colby and Brooke, and they had a relationship, but it wasn't such a great, it wasn't so long or intense that when the breakup happened, that it was a great breakup. Yeah,
Colby was really classy because she broke up in a text message.
Yeah,
Colby's a fucking coward, it's that player behavior. There's a player in in my family, and he's like, well, I don't want, people to be all up in my grill, and if I don't respond to their phone messages or whatever, they should get the point. And I feel like going, man the fuck up, call the woman, break up with her.
Right, and we really, Colby is I think, I tried to make sure that Colby was great at her job, but she was the quintessential player. That's why she has sex in the bathroom. That's why she has, these relationships with women who she cares about, but she just doesn't care about them like that. She genuinely cares about Brooke, and when she learns of Brooke being involved with Luce, it kind of tugs at her, and they have this, confrontational scene in the office where, she finds out Brooke wasn't exactly the person who she thought she was. But then we find out that, when they broke up, it was via text message. So she's kind of a coward, but she kind of doesn't deserve to have an explanation either.
Nope.
So we don't, poor Colby doesn't get, a lot of respect in the book. At least not until the end, I think.
Well, it's just so interesting how it ends, and no, we're not going to talk about it.
Okay.
Because, there are just so many gosh darn spoilers in your book, but I think one of the other things beyond betrayal is someone making the choice for you. Like, Oyaban made the choice for Luce, that maybe Luce couldn't accept having somebody else, in his life. And instead of talking to Brooke, she cut Brooke off.
Yeah,
she doesn't give Brooke a chance to make a choice for herself.
Right.
Right,
and we see that play out. I mean, we see those no choices played out further down in the book as well between Luce and Colby. There's those things where someone doesn't get a choice in how things start to flesh out. And there's always going to be somebody. I think even in real life, sometimes we just don't get choices, that things play out in a certain way that we wouldn't pick, but we have to play the cards that we're dealt. And so I think that part of what happens in American Yakuza II is that nobody really seems to be in control of anything.
No. I think there's the swirling of circumstances that everybody seems to be on unsure footing. And what's challenging, and you see, Brooke, Colby, and Luce are strong women. Mm-hmm. Yet there's so much action, so much going on, and unlikely situations where, like, I don't like where I am. I don't like the choices that I've been given, and I don't appreciate them, and this is ridiculous, and it's not in line with, what I deserve or what I think is fair or, just. And still they have to play it out. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's fairness is probably not a quality that's in this book. Mm-mm. There's nobody's treated fairly in here. in a sense that the choices that are being made, you know, nobody gets a choice in anything that happens in this book. In the circumstances that get created for them, nobody's given a choice.
Yes, definitely. I agree. And, you know, back to the vulnerability of this big wounded animal that is Luce, is, you know, there's a hairpin turn between, you know, rage and passion. Mm-hmm. And, you know, there's I'm going to push you away, okay, I'm going to pull you really close. And, which is, you know, literal, in the next reading, that I asked you to do.
Yeah, I think that, and this probably happens in that kind of, that breakup moment where you have like that kind of, you push them away, but yet you have sex with them and then you still push them away. Mm-hmm. And this is what happens in this scene. We're down a little further in the book, and Luce is still in this drunken stupor, and Brooke has decided she's going to confront Luce. Mm-hmm. If they're gonna break up, Luce is going to man up. She's going to tell her to her face, and that's all there is to it. She's decided she's going to confront Luce because she hasn't been returning her phone calls that night. She doesn't know what's going on. Remember, they've had this year of wonder, kind of like bliss. Mm-hmm. Well, the honeymoon's over now. Mm-hmm. The death, you know, the funerals happened, and now Brooke can't seem to put two and two together, so she's going to confront Luce. So this is where we open. Luce was beyond caring as wood fragments flew around her. She puffed on her petite cigar, staring at one of the shadows moving into the room. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, Brooke," she advised, and then puffed again, blowing smoke rings into the air. At least she hoped she hadn't lost her touch for smoke rings. Funny the things you think about when you've been drinking. Just a moment ago, she was craving a thick steak. Another whiskey cured that craving. "Luce, it stinks in here. Let me open a window." Before she could warn Brooke again, the sound of crunching glass and curses echoed in the room. "What the fuck happened in here?" The coffee table broke. Luce took another puff, pursed her lips, and pushed the smoke. "I told you not to come in here. Now get your ass out of here before something happens that we're both going to regret." The sound of the light switch made Luce shield her eyes from the blinking glare of the overhead lights. "What the fuck happened in here, Sammy?" "Get out, Brooke," Luce said, trying to stand, but having little luck. She swayed back onto the sofa. Luce followed Brooke's face as she looked around the room. She had to admit it resembled more of a disaster area than her pristine office. The coffee table was now chunks of glass. The whiskey bottle had left a hole in the wall where she tossed it, and the layer of smoke that hovered over her didn't help. "What the fuck happened?" Brooke rushed over to Luce and grabbed her arm. "Sammy, get me a washcloth and a towel." Brooke picked at Luce's bloodied left arm. The smattering of blood dotted her slacks and soaked into her white shirt. Luce yanked her arm back. She stung Brooke with a stare that froze her in her place. "Get the fuck out, Brooke. Do you hear me? What have you done to yourself? Did you cut yourself when the table broke? You need medical attention, Luce. This looks bad." Brooke tried to grab Luce's arm again. "You have no idea." "What do you mean? Are you hurt someplace else, Luce?" Brooke scooted closer, trying to touch Luce. Worry replaced anger that she'd thrown around when she came in. "Luce, what happened, honey?" Luce felt a warm hand slide down her arm. She wanted to lean into the touch, but couldn't. Part of her wanted to be wrapped in those loving arms. Brooke was always her island when she needed to beach herself mentally. Now, though, she wasn't risking a connection that could hurt her. Brooke wasn't her enemy, and neither was her grandfather. But knowing he had kept something so important as a wife from her, she couldn't trust anyone at the moment. It wasn't logical. She knew that. But it was how she was built. Learn from life's lessons, and you aren't likely to repeat them. "Get out, Brooke." "No." "Get the fuck out, Brooke." "No. I don't know what's going on, but you don't want to kick me out, Luce. Tears started to fall. We're lovers, more than lovers. I don't need you to remind me of what we are. I know. Luce, don't shut me out, please." Brooke pleaded as she reached for Luce's hand. Pulling it from Brooke's grasp, Luce looked anywhere but at her crying girlfriend. You want to help me, Brooke? Of course. Tell me what you need, baby." "Have you ever lied to me before, Brooke?" "What? Have you lied to me?" Luce reached for her tumbler with a sip of whiskey left in it. Got any skeletons in your closet you want to tell me about? Then we move on to chapter 12, and this is Brooke's point of view now in the same place. Brooke's head tried to negotiate with her heart. Lies? What was Luce talking about? What had happened in the few hours since she'd last seen Luce? She was a hot mess, the likes of which Brooke had never seen before. The cigar smoke was choking, the heat of the room stifling, and the office looked like it had been tossed by a pro. What happened tonight, Luce? Brooke's girlfriend was more of a stranger right now than the woman she'd loved for the past year. She took in the sight of Luce in total, finally landing on the bloody line on her arm. She squirmed a little, seeing the open cut still oozing droplets of blood. Why are you avoiding my question, Brooke? Luce slurred. What was the question, my love? Brooke tried to diffuse what was starting to feel like a potential argument. Was Luce purposely trying to pick a fight? Was it the alcohol, or was it the product of something else that happened tonight? Yes, you are my love, aren't you? I am, so let's talk, baby. About? How about what's cutting you so upset? Luce slid closer to Luce and reached for her hand again, but Luce pulled away. Trying to look Luce in the eyes, she reached up and pulled Luce's chin towards her. Luce, what happened? A smirk was her answer. Luce, what happened? Brooke tried again, more softly this time. Pursing her lips together, Luce shook her head, her eyes barely slits. She let out a long sigh, and Brooke thought her resolve was beginning to crumble. Luce crossed her arm and pierced Brooke with a glare that would wither some who didn't know her. When Luce didn't flinch or break off the stare, Brooke looked down at her folded hands, clearing her throat. She'd buckled ever so slightly under the pressure. Even when Luce was drunk, she was imposing, perhaps even more so. Alcohol seemed to lessen her restraint. She wasn't a mean drunk. She simply lost her logic skills that kept her on an even keel. Emotion ruled her head when she was a drunk. Sammy, you can leave. I'm staying with Luce tonight. Sammy, you can take Brooke home. I'm staying, Brooke said defiantly. Sammy? Brooke felt sorry for the ping-ponging Sammy. He didn't know which way to turn as each woman gave him orders. Finally, he stood ramrod straight and scowled at Brooke, then Luce. Oyabun, you fired me, so I'm sorry, but I'm going home. Miss Erickson, I'm sure you know how to call a cab and get home. Bowing at Luce, he continued, Oyabun, call me when you need me. With that, he disappeared down the long hall. A door shutting in the distance signaled his departure. Well, this is awkward, Luce slurred. Are you going to tell me what happened tonight? You need to leave. I told you, I'm not leaving. Brooke, trust me when I say you need to leave now. Luce stood, suddenly lucid and menacing. You don't scare me, Luce, Brooke lied. Luce's sudden demeanor change always signified something bad was about to happen to whoever failed to follow her orders. Luce had never directed that kind of anger towards her, until now. Let me in, Luce. I want to help, please. I fired everyone tonight, Brooke. You should know when to step off. Whiskey breath patted the side of her face as Luce stepped closer. She could barely handle the sight of her own blood, so the coppery smell of someone else's blood made Brooke start to gag. This was like a bad nightmare. No matter how hard Brooke tried, she couldn't figure out what had happened in the last few hours to turn her lover into a monster. Wanting to get to the bottom of whatever was eating Luce, she threw herself down on the sofa with a plop. Since I'm not an employee, you can't fire me, so I guess you'll have to throw me out. Suddenly, Luce positioned herself over Brooke. Strong arms bracketed her petite frame, and Luce's chest forced her against the couch. I'm not in the mood for fucking games tonight, Luce said through grinding teeth. Now get your happy ass off my sofa and get the fuck out of my house, or you'll force me to do something we'll both regret. Brooke felt the start of tears welling up in the face of the ominous threat. Without thinking, she reached up and ran her hand along the arms that usually cradled her to sleep at night. Tonight, those arms were somehow different. Luce jerked back from the light caresses and pulled Brooke up from the couch. In one quick movement, she was crushed against Luce's chest, her mouth assaulted by the warm taste of whiskey and a tongue darting in to lay claim to what was Luce's. Holding on for dear life, Brooke pushed herself willingly against the power that buffeted her body. Luce was like an animal trying to devour a meal. Her hands wandered over Brooke's body, scorching every inch she touched. Pulling Brooke's hair, she latched onto Brooke's neck, her teeth grazing the porcelain column in their haste to find the spot Luce knew would put Brooke on her knees. Brooke jerked his lips, suckled at the pulse hammering beneath them. Threading her fingers into the unruly dark locks of hair, Brooke pushed harder. Her mind stepped out of the way and let her body take control. Reacting on instinct, she slid her hands up underneath Brooke's shirt and glided up under Luce's bra. Slipping the bra up and over the generous breast, she thumbed the already hard nipples and pinched the rough contours of pebbled areolas. Like clockwork, Luce moaned against Brooke's neck. The familiar rhythm of their body acting and reacting took over. Luce slid her hands down Brooke's back and grabbed her ass, pulling her closer to Luce's hard body. Brooke worked her hands down and into Luce's pants. Unbuckling the front with one hand, she slipped the other between Luce's legs, suddenly spread wider, and wet lips desperate to be touched. Brooke's fingers slipped past slick hair Brooke's fingers slipped past slick hair and dipped into the wet confines of Luce's pussy. She added another finger as contractions signaled the impending orgasm Brooke so often recognized when she made love to Luce. It was always quick when Luce was troubled, which wasn't often, but it seemed to happen with regularity lately. "Fuck me hard. I've been bad," Luce whispered, her words once again slurred. Nothing registered in Brooke's brain. The words floated above her as she pushed harder against Luce. "That's it, baby," Luce whispered. The rocking of Luce's pussy against her hand anchored her to Luce, and Brooke pressed on harder, faster. Synchronized in their action, she felt Luce stumble and then arch. A hard spasm rolled off her, and Brooke welcomed the intimacy. Her tie to Luce strengthened in a weird sort of sexual dance she'd come to recognize was Luce's way of abandoning herself with Brooke. Falling to the couch, she cradled Luce tightly in her arms, their bond tenuous. Silence. She was afraid to say anything, to ask the why, or who had come between them tonight. What had kept Luce from sharing what had happened earlier still kept her at arm's length, even now as they lay entwined together on the couch. The tension between them now was worse, even palpable, not like the serene moments they usually shared after making love. "Luce? Don't. Just go." Luce sat up and straightened her clothing. "I'll call you when I'm ready." Within an instant, Brooke was sitting on the sofa by herself, suddenly scared Luce might not call. That's it.
Ow! Ow, ow, ow.
Oh, darn.
Golly! Oh,
I have
man.
nothing to say after that.
Right? That was some intense... You know, when I was reading it, and even after I finished it, I didn't feel like it was breakup sex.
No, we don't... hard to explain. I don't think either of them see it as breakup sex, but as one of those kind of drunken stupor sex moments. I'm not sure.
You know that it's almost like the desire to repel is as strong as the desire to draw near, in the sense that she wanted to push Brooke away, but she also desperately wanted the solace of their intimacy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that, she wants Brooke to kind of fix things, and yet she can't. She wants to, like it says, that she's wants to beat herself against Brooke, and just can't let herself do that. She just can't be weak right now when she's feeling so betrayed.
Because, there's this sense, and this is especially for people who spend the majority of their time in full control, is that if, after the betrayal that she perceived her grandfather of not telling her about this woman, is that she can't handle any more betrayal, so she's going to cut herself off completely rather than bleed out.
Mm-hmm. She's going to leave Brooke before Brooke can break her heart.
Yes.
Yeah. Because she just can't handle one more betrayal. Because remember, we have her grandfather who's betrayed her now, Frank who's betrayed her now. We start to see that as the book plays out, she's going to perceive some other betrayals. And it just, again, that's the theme of the book.
Dun, dun, dun. I've never had a book had such a, not a simple theme, but such a overarching theme. Like I told you, I like the language in your book, and so I actually have 2 quotes of my very own.
Oh.
That I pulled from it, because I was reading from Word doc, which means I didn't have to handwrite it out, which is great. Because I do take longhand notes, So I'm going to give everybody absolutely no context for the quotes, because I somewhat remember where they happened, but I'm not positive. The particular one I'm going to read right now has great symbolic value, and it conveys how Luce is feeling without blatantly saying, "This is how Luce feels." So here we go. Hypnotized by the burning fire, she watched as the flames licked at the logs like a lover licking her conquest into submission. The flames continued their assault on the log and opened the crack wider, exposing the burning embers inside before being devoured by the consuming heat. Her body ached for the same treatment.
Oh, I know exactly where that is, too. Oh, obviously.
Well, I'd hope so. Sometimes, my memory is not what it used to be. So that's usually the reason why I read something more than once, if I have the time to, before I discuss it, because then I can act real smart and remember where it all is. And I think that was when she was in Dr. Williams' office.
Mm-hmm. She's in the dungeon. She's getting ready. She doesn't, she has all this pain, and the only thing that she can think of is that she wants the pain to stop. Mm-hmm. And the only way Luce can get the pain to stop is to have pain inflicted on her.
It's not very different from cutting, where a lot of people, where she was feeling the emotional pain, and so, it's easier to feel the physical pain than it is to the emotional. And there's a book that I talk about often, Shadowland, by Radcliffe. And Dane, whenever she senses her weakness or feels that she was still controlled by Brad, who was an awful, awful girlfriend to her. And so when she feels that way, she goes to what she refers to as a quintessential top. And the one scene that you get more details from is where she's blindfolded, she's nude, and she's completely silent during the entire flogging. And the top is thinking to herself that she has a lot of respect for Dane because of the way that she took the situation. And so when I see other scenes where very strong women who are usually the top in a situation, but it had, there's a therapeutic element to that type of scene. Mm-hmm. So I kind of saw the two of them as the same in my head, even though there is obviously different connotations according to what the plot of the books are different.
Mm-hmm. In this is a kind of a second, that the scene that you read is that kind of second time where she wants to release the pain. The first time is when she slices herself with her stiletto.
Yes.
And she opens it and feels the pain, opens the pain, I think is the way I describe it in the book. And that, I spoke with a cutter. Actually, I was on lecture with someone who was a cutter, and they dealt with their gayness by cutting. And they said that, every time they cut, they felt relief. That the endorphins were released, and that pain of cutting somehow replaced the pain that they were feeling inside. Yeah. And they said that, it was kind of scary because the more they cut, the better they felt. Mm-hmm. Obviously, they got psychiatric treatment for that, because that's a very real, situation, and that could be very disastrous. And so I remember that when I was lecturing with this person. We lectured several times together, and I remember seeing the scars on his arm that way there, and just remembering that every time I saw that was his release. That was his way to deal with being gay and being victimized and being hurt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the way, the two, one's a 2-word phrase and this one, anyway. So in some ways it's a form of self-soothing and self-medicating, even though traditionally when people talk about self-medicating, they talk about addiction to drugs or alcohol. And, she obviously earlier with the alcohol was self-medicating. Mm-hmm. And so it's an unhealthy way to deal with a stressful situation. Mm-hmm. And Luce is not used to and has no comfort with feeling weak.
No.
And so rather than feel that, because the submission that she does is not a sign of weakness, it's saying, I need to be in someone else's hands, but it doesn't have that same vulnerability that she would have making love to Brooke.
Right, and by being in someone else's hands, we're not saying she needs to be soothed and told everything's going to be okay. She goes the exact opposite. Mm-hmm. She's not looking for comfort. She's looking for how to deal with her pain with pain.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think this is actually, the next quote I have, I think is actually within a scene. Closing her eyes, she imagined herself getting lost in a fog, evaporating and floating with a cool layer of mist that blanketed the ground. Her body covered with someone else's, their fingers gently gliding over her body. The start of a tremor eased through her. Yes. No, I liked it.
Oh, well, thank you.
No, I liked it because of I love great symbolism where it really conveys how somebody's feeling and matches up rather than being a tool. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because she's kind of describing a sort of fugue state, mm-hmm. where, she's going to the place she needs to go to feel okay or safe or something mm-hmm. along those lines.
Mm-hmm. Well, without giving where it is, I like symbolism in books. I like the way some authors have a way of symbolizing the way a character feels without saying, obviously it's show and not tell. Mm-hmm. And I would sometimes read something and think, gosh, I wish I could write like that. So I take it as a compliment that you like those symbols.
Yeah, there's actually one author that she doesn't make me feel stupid exactly, but I'm like, oh my God, she's so well read with the way that she writes. And this is Susan Smith or Smitty.
Oh, uh-huh.
Who wrote Drag Kings and the Wheel of Fate, which is a fucking awesome book. Mm-hmm. And there's a sequel to that, and she also writes Something While Wet. I think something like Rode Hard, Put Away Wet. Something I can't remember.
Oh yeah, I have that. It's an anthology.
Yes.
Yes, I have that.
So I love that, and then I have to remind myself. And I was thinking of this actually while I watch a lot of documentaries and things on the History Channel, and there are some commentators who are on tons and tons of episodes, and they just know so much stuff. And then I reminded myself, number one, they've probably done research before being interviewed for this episode. Mm-hmm. 2, learning is cumulative. Mm-hmm. So the sign of brilliance is not magically being able to absorb a phenomenal amount of information. These folks went to college and graduate school and continue to study. So that's how they know all this awesome stuff. Rather than thinking, gosh, I wish I was that smart.
true, and a good book starts with good research. So.
Yes.
And that's why they sound so, gosh darn smart.
Those damn smart people saying smart things in smart ways.
I know. I wish I could emulate them.
Oh, well, you got it going, girl.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So I think it would be awesome if we could do a book giveaway for American Yakuza II.
Oh, absolutely.
And I have thought of a really fun question. Let me take the choice out of your hands.
You go, girl.
I thought of a really fun question, which you'd have to have read American Yakuza to know.
Yakuza 1 or 2?
1.
Okay.
In order to win 2. And that is, what was the uniform for the folks who worked in Luce's house?
Okay.
What was their uniform that they worked while they were working within her house?
I just can't even say anything.
Because I was pondering that. And I was like, what would be a good question? I'm like, oh, that's fun.
That is fun. And we actually see Audrey Wentworth in this book.
Yes, in an entirely different way. Entirely. But
nobody is as they were in American Yakuza 2 as they were in American Yakuza 1.
Yes, I agree. So, bringing this kick-ass episode to a close, we have covered a lot of stuff.
We have?
We have. We've talked a lot of sex, which is terrible. It's just horrible.
Well, it's a Isabella book, so what can you expect? As I said, I asked my editor if I should add more sex, and because I thought maybe it was lacking, or maybe it had too much sex. And actually, as I said before we even started, I actually cut some of the sex out of this book.
Especially of a particularly poignant scene.
Yes, I did. And when I said, should I add it back? And she said, oh, no, I think it's fine. You have plenty of sex in there.
Well, you know what I liked about this quintessential scene was that it dealt with the largest and the most significant sex organ, which is the brain.
Mm-hmm. How can you believe that? You could have sex with just your brain.
Lord have mercy. It is so true.
That's true.
It is true. And I think, especially for us women folk, is that we tend to be made love to in our minds. That's something that, I guess, I was trying to explain to somebody my feelings of reading as opposed to watching, erotic scenes. And I am usually utterly fascinated by watching pornography, and my wife makes fun of me and says I watch pornography like a nerd.
Analyzing it?
Yeah, well, she watches me, and I turn my head to the side, and I look, and I think, and she does dialogue for me. That's interesting. I wonder how that feels. Or, oh, I'm going to try that sometime. Whereas when I am reading erotic scenes, or pornography, that's when it works for me. Because it involves my brain. And, the scene could be all of 2 pages. But I still return to it over and over again. And I find, I know you're going to find this unusual, that I often return to either bondage or illicit scenes. Like there's this scene in a book where one character is going to have a lap dance from the other. And the clothing that they were wearing, and like this, she was wearing a leather skirt and no panties underneath, and she had scooted her skirt up to the point where it only covered her moans. And then she's getting the lap dance, and I'm like, oh, that's so fucking hot. As opposed to if somebody showed me a video of the same thing, and it would not have stricken me the same way.
Are you talking about the scene in my book?
No, this
okay.
This is in, God, if I remember, Lonely Hearts Club. It's a Radcliffe book.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. The concept behind it is there's the one character is a writer, and she always writes this dashing butch called Ray, and then somehow the exotic dancer is also a butch. Is the embodiment of this character. And so she's getting this private dance from almost like her character come to life. And I know as a writer myself, awesome. That would be so fucking cool. If I was single and not married, like been together for 8 years. Anyway, but that would be really cool. So anyway, I'm terrible at closing out interviews with you, Isabella, because I don't want to stop talking.
Well, I was just going to say, in that particular book, there's a whole where she's on the dance floor, isn't there? Where she's there's a second person in this particular strip scene.
Oh yes, yes. The butch is leaning up against the stripper pole, and she's, I think she's got black tape over her nipples, and she's wearing either like a harness or something. So she's revealed, and then behind her, there's a woman who's fondling her, and she has these like really long blood red nails, and she's
looking right at the writer.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and the way that it's the first time she sees Ray, it seems like she what's it called? Climaxes on stage. But then when they're having this email interaction, she said, your orgasm is mine. So the next time it's the same, setup, slightly different outfit anyway. So then again, the nails and then, she's being aroused and touched and all this kind of stuff. And then she stops it before she climaxes and like kind of, she just kind of falls, and is in agony. Because she promised her orgasm to the writer. And then the lap dance scene happens in a private room. So for those of you who want to see that book, it's awesome. Anyway.
Yeah, I read that.
Not like I liked it or anything.
No, I can't tell at all.
I didn't thumb through it like millions of times or anything. And the scene is like 2 pages. It's 2.5 pages, and I'm still like, oh my God. Anyhow, thank you for gracing the Liz McMullen Show stage again. Absolutely, my pleasure. And hang on after we finish, because I'd love to have a little closeout. And I'm looking forward to seeing you at GCLS. So this is Back to the Future, because this will be airing after GCLS. Yes. I know. So the book will be out and people will be able to enjoy the interview and read the book. Sweet. And for the person who knows the answer to my very choice question, you can have your very own signed autographed copy of American Yakuza II. Absolutely. It would be my pleasure. Awesome. Yay. Thank you for having me again, Liz. It's always fun being interviewed by you. Thank you so much. It is a blast.